Welcome to Human Potential at Work, the show where we explore social impact, inclusion, and empowerment of everyone, including persons with disabilities. Your host is Debra Ruh, CEO of Ruh Global Impact, and co-founder and chairwoman of Billion Strong, an identity and empowerment organization designed to bring billions of voices of persons with disabilities together. To join the global community and to donate to the cause, visit billion-strong.org. That's billion-strong.org. And now, on to the episode.
Hello, everyone. This is Debra Ruh, and I am CEO of Ruh Global Impact. I'm very proud to be part and the executive chair of Billion Strong. And some of you will recognize my guest today, Doug Foresta. He has been on my show more than anyone else besides me, and I love his voice. He also is my producer sometimes, and sometimes Kevin's my producer, but mainly Doug, but Kevin backs him up because Doug's a little busy also. And I also want to remind you that Doug is a licensed therapist, but he also is the director of podcast services at Workforce 180, which is one of the groups that we're really proud that Human Potential is on that platform. That platform's really about the workforce and making sure that everybody can be included. So needless to say, I love the different shows they have on there. So Doug, for anyone that is just learning about you, do you mind refreshing people about who you are? Real quick, let me give a visual description, and maybe you could do the same thing. I have a background behind me that's advertising Billion Strong obnoxiously, and then I have very gray and purple hair. I have on a mixed blue shirt with purple glasses and a little gold chain. And over to you, Doug.
Sure. All right. So I'm 48, almost 49-year-old white male with glasses and bald head. I'm wearing a red shirt that says Workforce Pods on it, or a red, shouldn't say shirt, kind of like it looks like a tracksuit. Yeah. So that's me.
And besides that, it's always so interesting to me what people choose to describe. I actually think Rock is one of the most handsome men in the world, and he has no hair. And my beautiful husband, Ed Ruh, didn't have hair. So I'm very partial to men that don't have hair. So I think you're very handsome, but that's just my opinion. Tell us a little bit about who you are. And do you also mind, Doug, telling this audience how you and your family are very also proud to be part of Billion Strong, 1.2 to 1.7 billion people in the world with lived experiences with disabilities?
Sure. So as you mentioned, I'm a podcast producer, but I'm also a licensed therapist and have a lot of experience working with people with trauma, PTSD, trauma, anxiety. And I think what you're referring to is that I have 3 children, 17, 5, and almost 4 next month. And my 17-year-old, I know, and my 17-year-old and my youngest, my 3-year-old, are both.
And so interesting, these characters
they are
that make our world a better place. I love your son. I love the way
you.
he thinks. I just love this one. 2 things about his son, Sam, that is on the spectrum. Number 1, Dad told him, stop being on your device, stop getting on your device and go to sleep so you can be awake for school. And Sam was waking himself up when he was younger, like 4 o'clock in the morning to play games and stuff.
Yes, he was. Yeah.
And then another story I love about Sam was he came to you and said, Dad, I'm very concerned about the people at my high school that are taking drugs. So tell us that quick story.
That's right. Yeah. He said, there's this drug use going on. And so I said, what is it? He goes, the kids are vaping nicotine. And, nicotine is the most addictive drug.
I agree.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But did his peers agree with him when he was telling them not to smoke?
I have found they're very understanding. It seems like his peer group, but yes, I'm sure that they rolled their eyes.
But it's true. It's so true. Nicotine is the most addictive drug. It's horrible. It killed my father. My father got lung cancer because of cigarettes. So
no, absolutely.
Yeah. So I agree with Sam, but I love the way he looks at the world. It's so amazing.
Yes. I'll share with you one more that comes to mind is I remember I never buy scratch tickets. Maybe once or twice a year, it'll just strike me as a whimsical thing that I have a couple bucks and I happen to pass by. So it was one of those times that I bought like a, I don't know, $5 scratch ticket. And so I did it. And Sam goes, "Dad, you promised me you wouldn't gamble anymore." Like I never go to the
You're a big
casino.
gambler?
I
I
am
didn't
a
realize
huge
you were a
gambler.
big gambler.
When I go to the casino, I play the 25-cent slots for that, you know?
I remember I went to the casino with my husband one time, and he, went up to the window, and he cashed in $5 in nickels, and I said, "Was the lady hitting on you? That's a big roller?" He was like, "Yeah, Deborah." For my nickels. She was very impressed. We wanted to have a little bit of fun, but we didn't
Yeah.
really want to waste a bunch of money, so we just did the nickel slots. So, I miss him. I miss him. But anyway, Doug, you also have quite a bit of background in our space because I know that you also, when you lived in New York City, you worked in with a group.
Yeah, actually in Massachusetts.
Okay, I didn't realize it's in Mass, and then also you worked in child protective services. So,
I did.
what's so interesting to me about you, besides you're a dear friend, is that you have such an interesting background.
Yeah.
So you've worked with in group homes with people with intellectual disabilities. You've worked with endangered children, which I appreciate that, but I can't imagine what a hard job that is. I don't want to know what we do to children sometimes. I know I'm
Yeah.
in denial, but and I know we have to do it. We have to open our eyes, but at the same time, you're a licensed therapist and you're working with people, like you said, with post-traumatic stress disorder. And I almost would have to ask you, who doesn't have post-traumatic stress disorder now after have we survived the pandemic? I know 3 of my family members didn't. My son and 2 of my brothers did not survive the pandemic, but I know there was an estimate for a while that this was before we really went into the pandemic, that 65% of Americans would have post-traumatic stress disorder once this was done. And I think those numbers might even be bigger because it is very, very ridiculous right now, Doc. How are
Yeah, I actually looked at that in preparation for our conversation today. And let me just say something real quick about post-traumatic stress, because you're saying everybody, yeah, not everyone who experiences trauma is going to develop post-traumatic stress disorder. So I think it's important to distinguish between going through a traumatic event and then developing, really meeting the criteria for PTSD, which we could certainly talk about. But yeah, so one of the things I read was I read this morning, and again, I don't know if this is the absolute definitive, but I think it gives you an idea. Generally, before COVID, the general population, you have about 6% of the US population had PTSD at any given time. And since COVID, they said it's risen to about 15%.
wow, so that's still pretty
So yeah, more than doubled. But yes, it's important to recognize going through traumatic events and being impacted by them doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to develop full blown PTSD. And there's lots of ways to get that. But I do think it's worth saying that we have gone through a collective trauma. And if we think about work and we think about how that's impacted work, it's pretty clear, I think, that you can draw a line from that trauma to the Great Resignation or Great Migration or whatever you want to call it. There's definitely a line. So even if you don't develop PTSD, you still can be greatly impacted by trauma. But do you want me to say a little bit about that?
I would only because some of my audience, including me, might want to know because I think you bring up a really good point because I lived through the pandemic and I lost very dear people to me. It continues to be very traumatic. And but like you said, just because I did it, it doesn't mean I have post-traumatic stress disorder. So maybe you could talk about when should I even think that maybe I had PTSD and visit a
Right.
yeah, if you don't mind.
Sure. Absolutely. So let me say this. We usually develop PTSD usually develops when just having a traumatic event in itself may not trigger PTSD. But where it really happens is when that event becomes greater, it becomes a perceived threat to one's life. Now, which doesn't have to mean that you go to war. A lot of people think, I don't have PTSD. I'm not a veteran. I go on a mission in Iraq, but it doesn't have to be that. It's really relative to each person. So let's take the example of a police officer. So let's say I'm a police officer and I get involved in I stop an armed robbery and I have to shoot someone.
Hmm.
I might not, it's traumatic, but I might not develop post traumatic stress because I'm trained for that, right? Not that I want that to happen, but it's within the realm of possibility of something that I might have to do. But let's say I'm a police officer, and I don't want to make this too topical or go off on another tangent, but
Yeah.
let's say there's a school shooting and now I have to respond, and I have to respond to little babies. We know that the shooting in Newtown in Connecticut, a lot of those officers had to retire after that. They developed post-traumatic stress and couldn't continue because when you become a police officer, you don't sign up for that.
No,
That is
no,
beyond
that's
it's
not
below,
supposed to happen.
not
Even for
supposed
children.
it's not supposed to happen. So there are stressors that we can weather, even if they're difficult, but we can weather them. And then there are stressors that become greater than what our ego or what our protective mechanisms can withstand. And what starts to happen is some of the symptoms of PTSD are things like a lot of the people, what I hear from people with PTSD is, I feel very jumpy, hyper vigilance. I feel like somebody's just about to behind me. I
Right.
don't like, many of them will say, if I go to a restaurant, I need to see the windows. I need to have my back to the door. I can't allow anybody to be behind me. So that becomes difficult with going outside and being able to go out and do things. I don't like crowds. Another thing is having a sense of a foreshortened future. Just I don't feel like I'm going to live very long. Or another one is just an impending sense of doom. So
Right.
I just
All the time.
something terrible is going to happen. I just don't know what it is yet.
Which is a
Yeah.
horrible way to live. And by the way, we've all experienced those at
Yeah.
times. And it's also important to say that PTSD can affect somebody years after the trauma,
Correct.
years after the
Correct.
trauma. And we were dealing with it as a society. We have been dealing with it in the workforce, trying to make sure, especially with our veterans. But once again, as Doug said, it's not just military people or service people that get it, because the reality is you can get it from a car accident. There's a lot of trauma in our lives. There just is. But knowing when to ask for help, I think that's what's important. And I don't know that a lot of times we do know. When do we know we're in trouble? Or when do we think our loved ones are in trouble? Do you have any advice for us there? Because I know
Yeah.
we're concerned about our loved ones, right?
Sure. I think it's important for people to really be educated about the symptoms of PTSD and then to understand that there are levels of trauma. There's big T trauma and little T trauma. You could develop PTSD from your pet dying.
Oh, yes. Oh,
You
yeah.
absolutely could. I've had people who, and so understanding that and then understanding that, like I said, even if you don't have PTSD, you don't meet the
Right.
criteria for that. It's like the difference between major depression and just really feeling heavy. So you could have elements, right? You could have elements of a trauma response without necessarily having full blown PTSD. And how could you live through something that COVID has now killed over 1 million people in the United States, right? That's
Yep.
a lot of souls exiting
Lot.
this planet. How
And
could that not impact us?
and then not only did I have a loss of my own beautiful husband, but
Yeah.
two of my sisters that I love dearly lost their husband.
Oh,
So the impact left. I grew up with 5 kids in my family. I was one of them.
yeah.
And we lost 3 of our husbands
Yeah.
in 5 months.
I know it's, and sadly, that isn't that I think there's many people who could
I
relate
know.
to that.
I know we're unfortunately we're all yeah. And just how my family is reacting, we're all trying to take care of each other. My nephews, my nieces, everybody has been traumatized by this. And then the other day it was my husband's birthday. We all got traumatized again. And then
Yeah.
on Monday, we have another birthday of my sister's husband that passed. And it's just, how do we do this, Doug? How do we do this ongoing trauma that we're all experiencing, especially when, Doug, we have to keep working, we have to keep getting food, and of course, our money. I don't want to complain too much about the prices, but it's adding stress. But we went to the store 2 weeks ago and got a dozen eggs for 99 cents. I went back yesterday. That same carton of eggs was $2.63. And I think of families where there are single families and the woman might be working, multiple jobs. It's just, we are not done being traumatized, Doc.
No, and I think companies need to, and leaders and all of us really need to be trauma informed. So one of the things too that's important to understand with trauma the other thing is we didn't go into sort of dissociation and those features, but what when one of the things that trauma does is it decreases the activity in your frontal lobe,
Mm.
which is where inhibition and goal planning and things like that are. I'm sure you can relate to this in terms of grief. You just feel so foggy. You feel like you're on something.
Yes. It was so weird, Doug. I 3 times during the worst of my widow's fog, I forgot I had something on the stove,
Right.
and twice I burned it so bad it burned da start it damaged the pan, and I'm like, "Oh my god." And of course, I gotta cook everything on high because 'cause I'm such a terrible cook, but so I had to put a sign I put a paper sign on my stove for a while that said, "Turn off the burner. Do not walk away."
Yeah.
I would just walk away.
Yeah.
It was really weird, Doug. It was very weird.
And, it used to be, I remember when I got out of college and the attitude used to be leave your personal stuff at home. Business is
Didn't
business,
work.
work is work, and personal is personal. But the problem is
Mm,
that you can't make your brain, you're not, it's if your brain is in trauma mode and you're not thinking and clearly because you're in a fight or flight sort of mode and the front part of your brain is not working as well, that's going to impact your work and it's going to impact. Let's take an example of flight attendants. God bless them because look what's happening on planes. We never saw this level of violence on planes before,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So, what's happening? I think part of what's happening is you have a lot of people that are walking around on edge. They have less inhibition. They have less ability to regulate themselves because the way their brain is working. And then maybe you add alcohol to that and you end up with aggression. I don't know about you, but I see it all over the world. People are just
Yeah.
all over the world, all over my world. We seem to be a little shorter with each other and
Mhm.
quicker to anger.
Cutting each other off on
Yeah.
traffic,
Yeah.
cutting each other off in grocery stores with our
Yeah.
shopping carts, screaming out at people that are wearing
Right.
masks. The other day, a friend of mine she went to church and she wore a mask because she feels comfortable. And I don't know
Yeah.
why you care if I wear a mask, but some guy yelled out at church, "Oh, you going to get the operation done?" And it was like, and I will say a few days later, that man actually got COVID. I'm not saying it was karma, but no, I'm still a little concerned about COVID, so I'm wearing a mask, or I have a runny nose, or I have a cold I don't want to pass on. But yeah, people are just really freaked out, and they have been for years. Oh my goodness.
I really think that it starts, like I said, it starts with understanding. No one teaches us what happens when our bodies go into fight or flight. So we don't even learn to know what we're looking for. So how can you do anything about something if you don't even know what it is? And the thing about PTSD is unlike, let's say, bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, if you put somebody in the right position, and I say terrible, eventually they will develop trauma symptoms. It's not something you're born with. You're not born with PTSD. It happens because of some event and it's our body's way of trying to protect. But I do think that when you think about what people want from companies now, it's really interesting because one of the things that I've learned also recently is we see that there's not enough people, right? We see there's not enough people to do different jobs. My CVS, the pharmacist, it says they close for lunch every day because there's only one pharmacist. And hey, when they go to lunch, there's nobody.
Probably they should get to go to lunch, but it's
I,
very inconvenient for me. They should still get to go to lunch.
they should. And so one of the things I think that there's a narrative about there's not enough people. That's partly true, but the labor participation rate is actually quite high and the unemployment rate is quite low. So then the question becomes, why are we missing? And the conversations I've been having recently, I had a conversation recently with a neurologist. And we were talking about it. And he said, there's a neurology shortage. And I said, what happened to all the neurologists? Like, there were enough neurologists 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. Where'd they go? And part of it is people have retired. But another part of it is that they've not stopped working, but where someone was working 80 hours a week doing two jobs, they're now working 35 hours a week doing one job
Okay. Mm.
because they have decided to take care of themselves.
Yeah, thank goodness. Thank goodness.
So we're paying the price because we were living off the backs of people who were sacrificing their quality of life, to be honest.
Wow. Wow, that's powerful. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like when we get it here in the United States, we are so blessed in the United States, but we get clothes so cheaply, but at what expense to the workers in Bangladesh that are doing the clothes, at what
Right.
expense? When do we care about all of the humans? And I know that's what we're doing. And I don't want this to be a terrible, gloomy episode, but we do want to talk about just the realities. I will tell you, Doug, very deliberately, I've never done this before. Very deliberately, I'm not listening to the news anymore. I didn't, I don't know what happened. I know something bad happened. I don't want to know. And I was told when I grew up, my dad always said to me, it's very important to be a good civic citizen, Deborah. It's very important. You should educate yourself about the politicians so you know who to vote for. My dad really believed I should stay, you know, up to date on everything. But now I cannot with the grief I'm walking, not with I can't. And so what I'm focusing on myself is what I want to do to make a difference in the world. How can I help others in the world? I'm focused on trying to be grateful, for example, with my own loss. I had this wonderful man in my life for 41 years.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't get that. So I'm trying to navigate my loss by reminding myself I have a lot to be grateful for and keep reminding myself. But how do we do this, Doug? Because it's not going to end tomorrow. I don't think it's going to end anytime soon. It feels like we're breaking down society, hopefully to rebuild society in a way that works for more people and not just a tiny amount of people.
Hmm. Yeah. Let me give you, so it's not going to be all gloom and doom because
Mm.
I wanted to set the stage of defining the issue.
Right.
But let me give you a little bit of, as human beings, we have an amazing capacity, right? For the military says adapt, innovate, and overcome. I think it is something like that, or yeah,
Okay.
I think adapt, innovate, overcome. So I think of it as it's nothing new. As
Right.
human beings, we have a remarkable capacity. So yes, we have trauma, but we also have remarkable capacity for resilience. And I think a big part of our capacity for resilience is our creativity. So I like to think of this idea, this is completely in my mind, but I'd love to think that this happened at some point in history. And I just call it eating the bear.
Hmm.
And the way I think of it is that at some point in history, there were these human beings, and every once in a while, this hungry bear would come, take one of the people, take your wife, take your husband, take your uncle, eat them, and leave. And so every once in a while, people would just be, they all be huddled up, waiting for this bear to come back and, yeah, take Uncle Fred. Pretty traumatic. And then one day the bear comes and he's roaring and everybody starts running except for one person. Let's make it a woman. So this one woman is not running and they say, "Oh my God, run, run. The bear's going to kill us all. The bear's going to eat us." And she goes, "No, I think today I'm going to eat the bear." And she builds a bow and arrow. I think of that as a metaphor for what happens that, you
Yeah,
know,
that's a great metaphor.
there's a concept called post-traumatic growth. So there's post-traumatic stress, but there's also post-traumatic growth. Not that we should wish trauma upon ourselves,
Yep.
but I have seen in my work with people with trauma that you can transform it into something and you actually can come out stronger. Just like when you break a bone, when it heals, it actually is stronger than before it's broken.
I didn't realize that. That's cool.
Yeah. The break, when it heals, it actually makes it denser.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there is something called post-traumatic growth. And so we have a choice of whether to stay in the sort of lower primitive part of our brain and fight the flight attendants, or we can we can understand and we can take care of ourselves and have more compassion so that we can use our brains to do good things. One great example is the vaccines.
Right.
In 1 year, in 1 year, we vaccinated everybody in the US who wanted to be vaccinated.
Yeah. That's amazing that we did that.
I don't want to make it sound like it's gloom and doom. The important thing it's important to understand trauma, but it doesn't mean that there's nothing that we can do about it. Deborah, you're a great example of this, that you continue to do transformative work to make the world a better place.
Thank you, Doug.
And we have a choice. We have a choice about what, yes, we've been traumatized, but what are we going to do about it?
That's right. And could it make you even more empathetic and that much more determined to make a difference?
That's right.
And I've never heard of that term post traumatic stress growth, but I know that I've grown a lot. I know I have. I know my son has grown a lot. My daughter is still trying to figure it out, but we have grown. Doug, to just go to Workforce 180 for a second, because it's something that I'm curious about and maybe others would be. But Workforce 180 supports people that want to have a voice and really want to make a difference. And so you do all the podcasts. Have you seen the conversations shift as we've done that? How are you seeing more types of voices come in? I know one thing I would like to see more of is corporations at the top telling us why. The other day I was watching, man, I was looking at something about the great resignation, and I saw this one leader say, "Stop resigning." I was like, oh, that's all we have to do.
Stop resigning.
Just stop resigning. Oh, I didn't think of that. But I didn't think that was very helpful. And I believe everybody else ignored him too. But no, there is a reason why this is happening, and you need to pay attention to it. And I highlighted an article that Paul Pullman, the former CEO of Unilever, who is going to be on the show December
That's
15th. I am so
awesome.
excited. I'm so excited that I'm scared I won't be able to say anything. But he is really encouraging other CEOs to really stand up and do the right thing by the people that are their employees, who he believes is who they serve. And so don't side with the politicians, side with your employees. If you are a CEO, side with your employees, care what your employees think, and talk about it. Because right now, the younger generation, especially, the only stable ones that aren't doing the great resignation are people my age, the baby boomers. And so the younger generations are saying, if you are a bad corporation, people my age are just, it's like, whatever, we've gone this far, we'll get through it. But they are quitting work and wanting to do different things to make a difference. I see more of that. How would you recommend that CEOs do it? And also, do you think there's an opportunity? I'm asking you two big questions, but have the voices started shifting? And also, what is the opportunity for the CEOs, the leaders,
Right.
to side with their employees, but come out and talk about it so we can hear about it, blog about it,
Right.
articles, things like that?
Yeah, no, it's good questions. I'm certainly not the expert on this, but I can share my thoughts. And I do sit in on a lot of conversations because of being a
Yes.
podcast producer. So I can share from that. But so yes, definitely the conversations have shifted. There's, Rana Reeves, who's a creative director, talks about this a lot because he works with a lot of brands. And I recommend checking him out. It's a Ranaverse, RANAVERNC. So, he does a lot of work with brands and values. Again, it used to be the case that brands would stay neutral on social issues. And that's becoming not really an option anymore.
Correct.
And again, when you think about trauma and you think about so yes, the conversations are shifting, because there's more of an expectation now that brands will be involved and that they cannot be neutral. And if you want to attract and retain talent, you can't just add wages. You can't spend your way out of this. There's not a
Don't
high.
bribe us with money.
Yeah, it
We
doesn't
want
work.
you to care about our planet,
We want
other
you to
people,
care.
sustainability. We want you to care. And if you are a bad brand,
Yeah.
we're going to all talk about it, and we're not going to work for you.
Yeah. So here are some examples. And when you think about trauma, to bring it back to trauma, if I'm a Black person and during the time of George Floyd and the height of all that, and I'm watching all these images and I'm seeing everything that's going on in the country, and then I go to work, and depending on what my work environment is, do I feel safe to be there? And if I don't feel safe, am I really going to be productive? Or do I really want to be here? Or am I going to start looking for someplace else? If I'm a gay person or a trans person and I'm in a place where they are passing anti-trans, anti-gay legislation, and I'm going to work every day and my company isn't taking a stand. This is what happened with Disney, right? Disney, they got themselves caught in the middle. They didn't act fast enough for
Mm,
gay and trans people, And then they did take a stand, and then they caught the ire of the governor. So now everybody hates them. They're now they put themselves in a middle place that
I know. It's because a lot of times the brands really do get caught in the middle.
they do
But
get caught in the middle. And I do have empathy for that. But I think more than ever, when you talk about trauma, you're going to have to create an environment of safety for people. And if you don't, they're not going to come to work. And it used to be the case. The economics have shifted. When I got out of college, you were lucky to get any job. And if you didn't feel comfortable in fact, I'll share this with you. It's extreme, but the first company I ever worked for, like my first job out of college, to give you an idea how much the world has changed,
mm,
talking about safety, I used to sit next to this guy. He was a retired NYPD officer, and
wow.
he had a revolver from like a service revolver that he got to keep. And he wore it in like his holster. What do you call that? A leg holster. And he would take it out and he would load and unload it at his desk. And
Wow.
he'd say, "I love my job. I love my job. I love my job." Now, could you imagine today? Now, need to say, Deborah, it was hard to do work sometimes because
What was his job that he needed his gun?
he didn't need his
Okay,
gun.
that's
He
what I
was in
thought.
operations. He was like the head of operations. He did not need his gun,
Oh, oh,
but
wow.
he was an
Oh,
ex
here.
NYPD officer, so he had the right to carry it. Now, today we would never tolerate that, obviously, in the workplace. My God, you'd have SWAT coming in. But that's an extreme example. But there were definitely things that were tolerated in terms of sexual harassment and treatment of women and Black people, and how about and disabled people, and
I know.
I
It's
mean
great.
all these things. So we have to create cultures of safety and spaces of safety for people if we want them to do their best work, or quite frankly, if we want them to work at all.
That's right. And I just want to say one other thing that I saw. I don't listen to the news, but this came up on one of my social media accounts trending, and it was Walgreens, who is a great organization, was in trouble because they had donated money to a politician that was making bad decisions in Florida. And so I saw it, Doug, I didn't see it on social media. I saw it on change.org because I'm very active on change.org. When people are putting out petitions, I will jump in if I believe what they're saying. And they were saying, tell Walgreens to, and so they were internally were attacking the company. And so I want to say to corporate brands, you need to stop donating money to politicians, because you need to, once again, I'm going to let Paul Pullman say this. You need to side with your employees, not politicians that you paid some money to. And if you aren't going to do it, we are going to know what you're doing. We're going to find it out, and we are going to talk about it now. Yes, Walgreens is a good brand, but I would recommend they stop. Either side, stop this. Oh, no, Deborah, that's the way we do things in the States. Well, we need to stop it. I don't think, anyway, I don't think we should do stuff like that. And by the way, the young people don't either, and they're watching and they're going to stop working for you. So you having problems getting employees? Yeah, they're paying attention.
I'm going to say something controversial that people can take it or leave it. Is that when we talk about safety, and I don't know how we do this because
Right.
it's hard because we have to be inclusive in the workplace. But I also think that inclusivity does mean that we also need to have a space where people have a right to be conservatives,
Right.
people
I
have a
agree.
right to be
I,
Christians,
and
people have a right to be Muslims.
yep,
So we have to,
atheists,
yeah. So we also can't just cancel everyone. Do you know what I mean?
I agree, but at the same time, it feels to me like corporate brands should be neutral. They should not be siding with one political party over another. If you're going to do political campaigns, do it equally to both. I just think it's a mistake to be meddling in the politics. But
Yeah, it depends what it is.
I agree.
I
I
think
agree.
companies now are being forced to take a stand
Yeah.
on certain issues. Democrat, Republican, I get that's not. But for example, again, like Florida with "Don't Say Gay," I think Disney was they realized they had to take a stand because
Yes.
if
Yes.
they didn't, they were going to lose. They were
They're going to lose a lot forever.
they were going to right. It could really destroy their brand, and I think they made the right decision just too late, but it's gonna be worth it for them in the long run because Ron DeSantis is only gonna be around so long. Uh,
I'm
you
sorry. I was born in Florida. I love Florida.
know? Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the point being, that there is an opportunity for post-traumatic growth. And quite frankly, I think the companies that really support employees in taking care of themselves, have mental health days, don't overwork people, give them
Right.
the opportunity to work from home when they need it. Those are the companies people are going to work for, even if, to be honest, if the pay is equal or maybe even less,
I agree. And that's what I've
still
seen.
choose that. Yeah.
I know multiple talented people that have left and gone for less money because they liked the culture of the company better. And I also believe that if you're a C-level, a CEO or C-level suite,
Yeah.
you need to have a voice and you need to be telling people who you are. We want to know who you are. Now, we might not like who you are, but that's also okay. But I still go back to side with your employee, please care about your employees and stop thinking that you're all that because you're CEO. I'm CEO, but of a small, but it doesn't matter those things anymore. What matters, I believe, is that we're stronger together. So that's what I think. And I am not political. I do not consider myself a Republican or a Democrat. I do not. I did it one time, but I do not really believe in either of them anymore. I just want to be a good American and make as informed decisions as I can, but I can't go with either party because I don't like what's happening. But anyway, Doug, tell us more. I want to give you a chance to let people know how to find you. So tell us how they can learn about the podcast you're doing at
Sure.
Workforce 180. How do they learn more about Doug Foresta? I know you were doing your own show for a while, but I just think you have a very powerful voice. And I do
Thank
appreciate the
you.
work you're doing with Workforce 180 because I want to see more of the C-suite having a voice
I mean,
because you need to tell us who you are.
yeah, thank you. So yeah, people can go to workforcepods.com. Yeah, workforcepods at pods.com if they want to hear the shows that we produce. Of course, human potential work is on there.
Yes. Yes.
And yeah, if people want to reach out to me, they could do that at Doug at workforce180.com. I'm always happy to have conversations with people. And I guess the last thing I want to say is that you talked about being stronger together.
Yeah.
And that is what resilience, all the research shows that we think of resilience as an internal quality. And yes, it is partly, but a big part of resilience is having someone to walk with. Life becomes more bearable when we have people to walk with.
Yes. True. So true.
And now is the time that we need to gather together to bring our best selves to the world needs us.
Yes. I agree. And Doug, you're also on LinkedIn if people
Yes, I'm also on LinkedIn.
also on
Absolutely. Find me
LinkedIn.
there. Thank you for that. Yeah.
All right. I have one more question.
Okay.
What is your hope for your children? What's the hope for the future for your children? You have a 17-year-old, you have a 5-year-old, you have a 4-year-old, two of them have autism. What's your hope for them?
It's a very good question. I really appreciate you asking that. And probably one that I should mull over more often. My hope is what Dr. Martin Luther King said, that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it curves towards justice.
Oh, yeah.
So
I love that quote.
my hope is, and my sincere desire for the future is that our better instincts, and as Abraham Lincoln said, the angels of our better nature win out, and we use all this technology to make life more inclusive, more accessible, more safe, and and make this planet more habitable for everyone.
Oh, sudden. That sounds like we're meeting the goals of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. So I totally agree. And it's funny when you and I first met, we didn't realize that we were both part of this community. It's just so important. And that's why we created Billion Strong. It's about lived experiences with disabilities. Doug might not have a lived experience himself, but he has a lived experience as a father of two children that he loves to pieces and he sees amazing potential, but he wants society to accept them as well. So I know you're working right now with the baby, with the 4-year-old with an autistic coach. Has that been helpful to you?
Very helpful. Yes. Yeah. I would recommend anyone, and I'll give a shout out. It's a Asperger Autism something Alliance.
Messages.
Sorry, but look up AANE. You'll find it.
Yeah, I know. I think you have amazing children. I think you're amazing and your wife
Thank
is
you, Deborah.
amazing. But thank you so much for being on the show again today, Doug. And I hope you'll come on a little bit more frequently because we love your voice and it's really nice to talk to you. So
Thank you.
thank you. And thanks, everyone. Talk to you next week.
You've been listening to Human Potential at Work. To learn more about Ruh Global Impact, visit ruhglobal.com. And to learn more about Billion Strong, an identity and empowerment organization designed to bring the billions of voices of persons with disabilities together, you can join the global community and donate at billion-strong.org. That's billion-strong.org.